What's the most legendary thing that happened in your school? Story 1. Jeff jumped off the roof of the chapel into a dumpster filled with empty cardboard boxes. 50-foot drop, 8x8 dumpster. Twice a week at our school, the junior and senior guys were on garbage recycling duty after lunch. We'd gather all the garbage bags and recycling from the classrooms and offices. The building was a school attached to a church with offices and a sort of community center. It wasn't a huge building, but it was pretty big. We'd take all the garbage and trash out to the dumpster, which was set next to some sheds behind the building. That's how it all started. Jeff jumping off a 10 to 12-foot shed into a dumpster full of cardboard boxes. We'd laugh, roll the dumpster out to where the garbage guy could get to it. Someone else rolled it back when garbage was collected. One day, Jeff climbed the backstop of the baseball field right near the dumpsters. That was a 25 to 30-foot drop, I think. He made that one look easy. Then he dropped in from out of a tree. That was probably about 40 feet. Finally, about a month from our graduation, he told us his plan. He had to break into the crawl space above the chapel, accessible by a padlocked trapdoor on the third floor of the classrooms, then climb up through the attic space of the chapel and onto the roof. The chapel parking lot sloped sharply by about 7 or 8 feet, which is where the 50-foot drop comes in. We saved boxes for weeks, set them up in the dumpster, put it in the parking lot about 15 feet from the chapel wall, and watched the jump. Story 2. I took an A-plus course in high school. We had an all-right-sized lab room for stripping computers and another room full of computers for other work or lessons. There were a few stuffed animals in the lesson room as a half-hearted attempt by my teacher to decorate. Those come into play later. My teacher kept finding corn history on one of the computers. It was always horribly spelled or incoherent searches, and she assumed it was a freshman being a smart butt to impress his friends during a different class. One day she gets fed up with it and makes a special project for us nerds in her A-plus course. She gave us one of the lab computers and the smallest cam she could find and asked us to make a hidden camera. We compiled and made a decent one and brought it into the other room, set it to record with more than enough hard drive space, and aimed it at the perp's putter. The next day, we fire up the vid and see one of the seniors coming in before school starts, Googling some corn and giving himself the old wax job. He cleaned up with one of the stuffed animals and went about his business. She threw out the stuffed animals and the cops got involved. Kid got into trouble, but went into the army after high school, so maybe it all worked out in the end. Story 3. I went to a professional training high school. We had to choose a major for our senior year, and on Tuesdays and Thursdays, we would spend the entire day in classes involving our chosen major. My tech teacher was cool as frick. He'd give us a project on Tuesday morning, and we'd have until Thursday afternoon to turn it in. If we were done early, have fun on the internet. If late, well, that's a strike on your grade. Most of the students busted butt on projects on Tuesdays, so we could watch Jerry Springer on the TV cart in the back of the room on Thursdays. Me and 2 other kids would play Warcraft 2 on the network computers we set up. Seriously, this teacher didn't give a frick, as long as our work was done. One Thursday, one of the students in my class was flipping around the in-service channels the school had. Sometimes they would play a movie on it for some class. Guess what? Corn. Hard freaking corn, black on black corn. Student quickly turned it down and turned the TV from the line of view of the teacher. Teacher still heard it. He came over, coffee cup in hand, looked at the class, looked at the TV that wasn't turned off in time, looked back at the class, took a sip. First off, is anyone offended? Class, no. Keep it low. If someone comes in, turn it off. Story 4. My high school was a bit on the sketchy side. Number 1, during my sophomore year, there was a fire, and despite all the fire drills we'd been doing since kindergarten, no one really knew what to do. Some students made their way 10 blocks away to a Wendy's and a Wall Bombs, where they proceeded to rob both. Number 2, at the end of my junior year, this sophomore threw his freshman girlfriend through a display case. She ended up with 13 stitches, and he got a lovely pair of handcuffs. Number 3, in my senior year, we got a new principal because the old one quit at the end of the year prior. Anyway, this was the year the 5th Harry Potter book came out, and even before the school year started, people were calling her Umbridge because of her reputation at her last school. Most of us thought she couldn't be that bad. Then we met her. She really was awful. To make matters worse, she was racist to boot. One of the black teachers didn't agree with her teaching style, so she fired his lazy butt, in her words. Within a week, the NAACP was at the school. Before she finally resigned, there was a student walkout and people started throwing cafeteria fruit at her whenever they saw her. We were all glad to be rid of her. Story 5. My first day of high school, I was starting at a whole new neighborhood from moving and knew no one, so I kept to myself. I didn't handle crowds all too well, but I mustered the courage to get out of bed and get ready for school. I ran downstairs and talked to my dad about what I expected to get out of the day and ate breakfast. I walked out to the corner to catch the school bus, and that was awful. Nowhere to sit, as everyone felt they each had their own dang seat. Story short, I made it to school. As soon as we made it to the school, I started walking to my locker. There were so many people, I was about to lose my mind, and I asked myself if it could get any worse. It did. A girl bumped me from behind to get ahead to catch up with someone. In one swift action, she ripped off her backpack and unzipped it to pull out a kitchen knife to stab the girl directly in front of me right in the back. I froze. I couldn't breathe. I felt dizzy. I turned around and walked straight home. I lived about 10 miles away. I just kept walking. I never looked back. I just wanted to make it home, crawl upstairs, and sleep in. Story 6. Oh, frick, here we go. We had a bomb shelter at my high school. I don't know why, probably because of when it was constructed. Anywho, one particular butthole weed dealer kid, he was the kind of D-bag who would actually threaten people if they didn't buy his weed, brought a 2-pound sack of that chronic to school and hid it in the hole underneath the tiles by the garbage can, aka the bomb shelter access. A teacher saw what happened during his free period, went down and proceeded to F this kid's finances up something awful. As it turned out, the teacher toked up to his heart's desire, then when he had enough, he lit the rest of it on fire. Then went back up into the main hall into the bathroom just before the bell to switch classes. Bell rings, the teacher comes running out of the bathroom, cries out that there's a fire, grabs the fire extinguisher, and hops down into the shelter. By the time the fire department and police showed up, he was covered in white powder, stoned out of his mind, and had a perfectly valid alibi to be ripped out of his mind since everybody saw his quick thinking and jumped to action. The principal furnished this dude with a can of Pringles and then thanked him for saving the school. Story 7. 2 years ago, the app Yik Yak was growing in popularity at my school. Maybe about 25% of the student population had it, but since it is anonymous, people started roasting other people through it. Just as people were no longer using Yik Yak, our craphead principal heard about people roasting other people, and he made an announcement talking about Yik Yak and digital citizenship. Naturally, everyone re-downloaded the app, and anybody who didn't previously has downloaded it now as well. Word quickly got out that some teachers got Yik Yak as well, and were monitoring it. People started to post stuff like, "Fight in the art hallway," and laugh as a group of 3 teachers would speed walk by them towards an art hallway, on to find out that there was no fight, and see the next post, "Fight in the cafeteria." This went on for 45 minutes until people moved on to better pranks. "I'm pulling the fire alarm next period." Our craphead principal misread this as firearm and called a lockdown on the school, which lasted for 80 minutes, and there were cop cases all around the school. Later that night, my school was on the news, and Yik Yak is now blocked within 100 meters, I think, of any school in my school board. Story 8. I'm from a small town in Indiana. That means 2 things. Nobody really knows what you're talking about when you say where you're from. Here in Indiana, you're either from around Fort Wayne or around Indianapolis. You never see fights break out. Maybe a little slap fest, but that's it. The worst I'd witnessed before this was this one girl dumping Gatorade on another girl. Nothing exciting. But this day broke both stereotypes. We were put on a hard lockdown that day, meaning we had to sit in class until the teacher released us. We missed the entirety of 3rd period, sitting there in 2nd period while our teachers got bored and started watching cat videos with us on YouTube. Typically, a hard lockdown means a shooter got in the school or something, but nope, that apparently wasn't what was going on. A senior, who was over 18, got in a fight with a freshman over a sophomore girl, and then they pushed each other out a freaking window. We were on the news. You don't say you're from around Fort Wayne anymore. Nowadays, in Indiana, you can get away with saying, "We're from that town where the kids went out a window." Story 9. This happened at my school in the UK around 2002. We had an indoor swimming pool at my school that was always really cold, and one particularly freezing December day, a bunch of us decided that we really didn't fancy having to do swimming for PE. So we dared this kid, called Todd, who was pretty crazy, to crap in the pool. He said he would do it for £10. We had a quick whip round and managed to get the money pretty quick between us. To avoid getting caught, he decided to crap into the pool from the roof through a skylight. A lot of the buildings in our school had staircases on the outside, so it didn't take much effort for a couple of us to give him a leg up onto the roof. Once he was up there, we ran back down to the pool and looked through the windows. Sure enough, after a couple of minutes, we saw 2 or 3 of Todd's butt apples drop into the perfectly still pool, causing a gentle, disgusting, but oddly beautiful ripple. There was no PE for us that day. My favorite due to the visuals. Story 10. I attended a high school called Rampart that, despite being a blue ribbon school, had serious budget issues. The budget problems got so bad that the principal started renting out the school gym to anyone willing to pay up to use it. Some guy rented out the gym for a Saturday night, saying he was going to hold a church dance. Instead, he held a rave that got so out of hand, it destroyed the gym. The incident quickly grew into legend amongst the students. Many claimed to have been there or to have known the guy who threw the rave. We weren't able to use the gym for the rest of the year. They kept the doors locked, but there were constant attempts to force them open so we could see the damage. It didn't take long for the students to start referring to the school as Rave Party, and whenever we had to sing the national anthem, we would finish it, "And the home of the rave." The next year we had a new principal too, but we never knew if the old principal was fired because of the rave incident. Story 11. In high school, we weren't allowed to wear costumes for Halloween. My senior year, a giant group of us, about a good half or 3/4 of the class, decided that we were going to dress up anyway and meet in the parking lot before school to march in together. I spent the night before making my costume, which was a suit of armor made out of cardboard with metallic tape, a sword made the same way, and one of those broomstick horses. The next day, we all gathered like we had said and marched in together. It was hilarious. But I guess they found out, so the deans and assistant deans were waiting for us in the cafeteria to take our IDs so we could report to detention. One of my friends had dressed up as an ATM that he made out of cardboard. When they asked him for his ID, he was ready and slipped it out of a slot like a debit card. Story 12. A guy from my high school thought it would be a great idea to streak through the halls on the last day of school. After running around buck naked, people who witnessed it began whispering about some guy streaking. Pretty soon, the entire school was talking about this unknown mystery guy who ran around with his dong out. Biology teacher witnessed it and said, "Maybe it's just chilly today, but he isn't very well endowed." Soon after, he went to the front office and turned himself in. He apparently walked into a room full of administrators, all women, and just said, "It was me." They all busted out laughing and said, "Just don't do it again, okay?" When I did that, I ended up body checking a girl that didn't get out of my way and getting yelled at by RCMP. Still totally worth it. Story 13. There was a huge texting scandal where a handful of girls' images were being sent around, and, well, when the school caught wind of it, they did the only thing a school could do. They held an assembly. Girls in the auditorium and boys in the gym. After an hour or so of, "You shouldn't do that," they had the district attorney come in to talk about the legality of underage texting. One of the seniors stood up and asked him if it was legal if they were over 18, and he said yes, and the entire place went nuts. Everyone was cheering, clapping, and laughing. The principal walked over to the mic and said, "Who asked that?" The guy stood up again and triumphantly said, "Zen Master Steve." The audience once again erupted into cheers as he got called into the principal's office. Story 14. Every Easter, our religious education teacher bolted a wooden cross onto the wall, and people could volunteer to go on the cross. You stood on a little platform, and there were leather straps to hold your hands in place. He said that if anyone stayed on for longer than 5 minutes, he'd pay them £5, but nobody ever managed it. I've been to a few religious events where there was a thing where you could take part in a challenge of sorts, where you would have to hold a large bolt in each hand and attempt to keep your arms up like the cross for 5 minutes. I did it each time, and it was heck. It certainly drove the point home how brutal of an experience it would have been, and it wasn't even a fraction of the suffering. Story 15. My friend used to pee in the library book return slot as a protest for being sent to Saturday detention. He'd never been caught because the school was empty and cameras were off on Saturday. One day, a stray teacher happened to be in the right place at the right time and walked past him doing it. The teacher screamed, and he panicked and pulled away quickly. The flap for the return slot was a single hinge and folded inward and down, so when he pulled, it closed on his dong and pinched it shut. For the next 3 hours, he was stuck with his dong in the wall in excruciating pain, while several people who were called in tried to pry it loose. Police showed up and broke the flap, and he was sent to a correctional school on Monday for a month. Story 16. Our school has a huge statue of a Mustang at the front because our mascot is a Mustang. It's about 40 feet up above the entryway, so everyone sees it when they come in. One morning there was a bright pink rubber dong on it because Mustangs are male, and our huge statue was neutered. It took them a while to get it off because they didn't want to ruin the statue or leave any piece of the evidence behind, and it was too heavy to remove from its place. So there it stayed with a banner hung across the entryway blocking the statue. Nobody knows who did it, except for the masterminds of the crime. It took me a while to get it off. Story 17. Apparently some of the guys a few years ahead of me got into the principal's car, took off the brake, and pushed it up a makeshift ramp to the roof of the sheds. I don't know how he got it down. These guys in my year managed to swipe the vice principal's smoking pipe. They put up ransom posters everywhere. In another class, they managed to get into the ceiling tiles and plug socket, so they took an old phone with a dirty ringtone and a charger and left it there. For whatever reason, because of acoustics, the sound seemed to shift around the room as you walked. The number got passed around so people could call whenever they needed to disrupt the class for a while. Story 18. Went to a boarding school, so several sensual tapes and photos got leaked. This was 2004 to 2006, so before iPhones and whatnot. This mainly happened due to a program called My Tunes, where you could share your iTunes and movie libraries on the network. So people would accidentally drop their videos and photos into folders that were shared without realizing it, and people bored looking for new music or whatever would stumble upon it. Once the administration found out about a video, and the student was 18. Allegedly, he had to watch the video with the principal of the school in his office in order to determine that it didn't happen on campus and that both participants were of age. Didn't get in trouble at all. Story 19. When I was in grade 9, I was sitting in the computer lab working during the communications class. All of a sudden, we hear this loud revving getting louder and louder, something passing by very quickly, then fading away. Our teacher ran out of the room after it and cracked. I had no idea the man could move that fast. I was in crutches due to a sports injury, so I had to hobble out behind the rest of the class as we tried to find out what was going on. Apparently, one of the seniors brought an ATV to school and drove through the halls. What was legendary was that he somehow was never caught. Story 20. Seems like every couple months you practice fire drills, and one day the alarm goes off. We start making our way down the stairwell, and there's smoke. I get outside and say to somebody, "Wow, they make these fire drills so realistic, smoke and everything." The reply I got back was, "The school really is on fire." So yeah, my school caught on fire. That was legendary. I'm not the brightest tool in the sheds. Well, I guess that's what the random drills are for. If you don't know the school is actually on fire, you'll leave in an orderly fashion. Story 21. My junior year, the seniors put hay everywhere inside the freaking English building, where it basically looked like a farm. One of the admins wasn't even letting people look at the mess inside. Also, when I was in second grade, my school was supposed to have a fire drill, so for some reason the alarm wasn't going off. The lunch ladies decided it would be a good idea to set something in the kitchen on fire to make the alarm go off. They burned a good majority of the lunch that was supposed to be served that day. Story 22. One hot day in June when I was in 6th or 7th grade, there was basically a riot at our school. Pretty much every kid in the school at lunch recess gathered at the office entrance to the school and started chanting, "It's too hot. We want to go home." It was pretty incredible. A teacher at one point came out and said, "We're calling the police," to no avail. Finally, the bell rang and everyone cheered and went inside. No one I've talked to remembers this event. Should have turned the hose against them. Story 23. At the school where I used to teach, the students told me that years ago, someone swapped the science teacher's Bill Nye video with a hardcore corn tape. According to legend, the teacher didn't notice for quite a while, and the students watched several minutes of smut that day. I told my class that it was a stupid rumor, and I'm sure that never happened. When class was over, one of my students walked up and said, "Mr. Hi-Fi Low Class, it's true. My brother was the one who switched the tape." Frick. Story 24. There's a tradition here in Australia that the Year 12s, final year of high school, usually have a day called Muck-Up Day, where they play pranks or whatever in the school. Well, one year, the Year 12s decided to F with the whole school and placed roadwork signs and cones on one of the main roads next to the school. They diverted all that traffic through the school, essentially messing up a lot of people's days. It's the best thing anyone has done on Muck-Up Day at our school. Story 25. Some dude in English class sat next to the electrical outlet, so he decided to grab the kid next to him and stick a piece of metal into the outlet. Shocked the heck out of both of them. They were both fairly okay, but almost scared the teacher to death. Also, there was the time a girl fricked two dudes in the auditorium during a basketball game, and it was caught on a school camera. Her family ended up sending her somewhere else after that. Story 26. Rumor says two junior kids did it in the gym changing room. It's nothing that special, but in the story, the girl was on her period, but they did it anyway. How did they know the girl was on her period? Because the teacher heard it and told them to come out immediately. The boy came out with blood on his face like a coyote eating a corpse. Apparently, someone liked going downtown speeding through red lights. Story 27. We have a school news channel that sometimes does live segments about new stuff going on. This was every morning in my homeroom. One morning, they're doing a walkthrough of the new part of the school they just built. They walk into a staircase, and some girl is sitting on some kid's face on the floor. This is at 8 a.m., and the entire school saw it. Story 28. For 5 consecutive Halloweens in a row, someone managed to set off a smoke bomb in one of the stairwells, causing the school to have to be let out early. They'd do it just after lunch, after most everyone had just entered their first afternoon class. It was amazing. Like, F yeah, getting to go home 2 hours early on Halloween. Story 29. Not too long after Columbine, 2 kids ran into the commons at my high school and started throwing firecrackers everywhere. Most students thought it was a shooting and ran away, terrified. Someone called in a bomb threat right after. If I recall correctly, they only caught one person involved. Man, that kid is no snitch. Story 30. For Muck-Up Day one year, the last day of school for Year 12s in Australia, a group of students put a cow in the principal's office, which was upstairs. But the cow couldn't walk backwards down the staircase, so they had to crane the cow out through the balcony. We weren't allowed to have Muck-Up Day pranks after that. Story 31. Kid gets yelled at, runs out of school into the woods. Helicopters come and search for hours for the kid. School goes on lockdown. SWAT team finds him a mile away eating Snickers in the woods. Comes back the next week like nothing happens. I saw the whole thing out the window. Very crazy. Happened last month. Story 32. I watched a friend sneeze and hit their head off a desk so hard they gave himself a concussion. Oh, I did this in 2nd grade. Hit my mouth on the desk and my tooth went through my lip. No one really noticed I sneezed though, and they all thought I just banged my face into the desk out of boredom or psychosis. Story 33. Some kid got a bejesus from his girlfriend in one of the stairwells in the middle of class, and they somehow didn't notice a security camera aimed right at them, and it apparently ended with them, both sets of parents, and the principal watching the security footage together. Story 34. 2 teachers effing in an empty class. They thought they had locked the door. A student caught them. They were both fired. My high school had the basketball coach getting caught boning the girls' dean in the senior rec room. Story 35. My middle school was on a hill and the tallest building in the area. During Fleet Week, the Blue Angels flew what must have been 100 to 200 feet above it, shattered like 30 windows on the top floor of the school. Story 36. A student accidentally butt-dialed his mother while the class was watching Platoon. The SWAT team showed up. I wish my school got to watch Platoon. I had to watch it on my own time. Story 37. Someone, not me, was tired of drug dogs going through the halls, so someone sprayed bong water all over the principal's car. Dogs didn't come back. I don't know, I think it was you. Story 38. Somebody streaked buck naked through my conservative Christian college campus at high noon wearing a V for Vendetta mask, dodging security, and giving kids noogies. Story 39. My school was featured on Tosh.0 at one point. It was the video where the teacher broke up a fight between two girls by body checking her into the ground. Story 40. A student locked his teacher and classmates in a room after setting it on fire. It wasn't a very good school. Ending someone's life, the ultimate prank. Story 41. A massive Roman candle fight involving about 50 kids in the middle of the field on Halloween night. Story 42. I go to Columbine. Please leave your stories in the comments. I'd love to make a video of them in the future. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe.